We begin with a Fox News alert. The White House briefing set to begin a half hour from now as speculation heats up over the president's calm before the storm comment during a photo op with military leaders last night. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Meantime, there are new developments and new images coming in from the massacre in Las Vegas.
Get over here.
This video, captured by a Vegas traffic systems technician, shows people running for their lives as a hail of bullets rained down on them. And as police search for a motive, the gunman's girlfriend may have provided some new insight. Will Carr is live from Las Vegas. Will, what are you learning about the shooter today?
Well, hey there, Dana. Authorities are being tight-lipped. In fact, they haven't held a press conference in the past 42 hours. But we do know that federal authorities are looking into the potential that Stephen Paddock could have been planning other attacks in both Chicago and in Boston near Fenway Park. We also know that the FBI is continuing to talk to his girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, who came back to the United States earlier this week. We know that they're asking her about his mental state, also that she continues to tell them that he was compassionate, that he loved her, that he pulled her out of an abusive relationship, and even recently bought her a new car. At the same time, we've learned that there's a lot more to this investigation. Just authorities are not coming out and answering many questions right now, Dana.
Will, you're at a memorial for the victims. Tell us more about that.
We are. It is quite emotional, and I want to walk you through here. A carpenter from Chicago came. He drove down yesterday, and he put up 58 wooden crosses, each one with a name and a picture for the victims. You can see Angela Gomez here, Jenny Parks, Michelle Vo, Christopher Roybal. Throughout the course of the day, we've seen a number of family and friends come up here and pretty much break down. And then you have the strangers, people who are just simply driving into town. I spoke with one couple from Seattle who saw this and they decided to stop. Take a listen to what they had to say.
This is awesome. I think this is really cool. You know, the guy coming out and paying tribute to each individual person. That's really nice.
And that's what we've been seeing, Dana. People just coming and walking along here. And I can tell you that in other parts of Las Vegas, like the Strip, it is business as usual. And you're walking along, it seems like any other week in Las Vegas. But in this part of the city, it is certainly a remembrance to all the lives that were lost Sunday night. Dana.
Wow, thanks for bringing that to us, Will. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. We are just getting live pictures in of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. As you can see, they have now boarded up the windows that the gunman shot out Sunday night. Let's bring in Kimberly Guilfoyle, one of my co-hosts of The Five, one of the smartest people I know when it comes to investigations and legal stuff. So thanks for being here early with me today.
What a pleasure.
So we're 4 days in after this massacre, and we still don't quite have a full picture, but are we closer than where we were?
I think we are, and you know, the authorities are working diligently around the clock. You have more than 100 investigators working on not only the shooter, but his companion, Mary Lou Danley, to find out anything they can about them, especially as it pertains to the past 5 years. Now, keep in mind, the shooter in this used to pay cash for a lot of his transactions or purchases.
Including his home.
Including his home.
$350,000.
So that, to me, right away is a little bit of a flag. So where was he able to amass this type of cash? What kind of revenue sources and streams? Was it just for gambling? Did he keep it in his home? Was he doing something else as a lifestyle to supplement to be able to have this kind of money and purchase numerous homes? However, for concert events, and we know that he was interested in a couple other venues, as we just reported on Fox News, you would have to use a credit card to make those type of transactions, to book them months in advance. So they're going to look for that forensic trail and follow the money to be certain in terms of what was his planning and attempts. With this also, I think, important from a prosecution standpoint, when we look at investigations like this, you see, in fact, that there's planning, premeditation, which we use to negate to say the person wasn't like legally insane. Now, of course, the shooter's deceased. He took himself out at the scene when the security guard came up. But you do want to know about his mental state and the motive. What was behind it? And then you still have groups like ISIS trying to lay claim, but there so far hasn't been a digital footprint of this man showing a point of transaction where he was actually met somebody, became radicalized, or converted.
Do you think it's possible that he acted alone?
I think there's a listen to the briefings, right? And what the Lombardo was saying is he feels that maybe there's evidence that there's some kind of indication, indicia, that in fact he was working with somebody or acting in concert. We don't know that yet, but for him to even suggest that tells me that they know something in that vein, because when you have that amount of weaponry, ammunition, 2 sniper nests and shooting platforms, it just really doesn't make common sense to even the average person watching that doesn't have an investigation background to say, wait a second, how could this man pull this off on his own? So that's why it's important to gather all the witness statements, the rooms next door, the rooms below, the rooms above, and really take hold of those security cameras.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yes, on all the different floors to see what kind of traffic was going in and out. And by the way, how did somebody not notice that he was setting up surveillance cameras outside of the room and on the cart? And this is why he also chose Mandalay Bay. He was known as a high roller status there, so they kind of leave you alone. It's sort of a hands-off type of thing. So he knew that he would be sort of above suspicion or reproach. To be perfectly honest, I'm telling you, when you look at the Wynn, they already had some measures because Steve Wynn, and he's going to be on later on the network with Chris Wallace on
Sunday.
He had measures in place that he used with SEAL Team 6 people that had background, former intelligence people, to try to really make that casino very safe and secure. Not saying that Mandalay Bay didn't, and their security team did a phenomenal job. But this guy was familiar with this particular location and felt that it gave him the best vantage point to be able to operate and move stealth-like throughout the casino.
Does it tell you anything about him that he was not necessarily targeting just this particular country music festival? If he was looking at other urban centers, does the political angle go away?
I don't know that the political angle goes away. It could have been part of this. There could have been a number of things working together to kind of form what he wanted to do. But I will tell you this. They all share one thing in common, which is open air space and being able to get from a high vantage point to establish a kill box, essentially shooting down. That's why he built the platform, to be able to get a better angle to identify targets, using trace, et cetera, like that, to be able to then have as many casualties, maximum, as possible. And I'm speaking about this from an investigation standpoint. Horrific what happened here, but this is the mind of a killer that's trying to go for maximum casualties.
And if my last question for you, what would be the question you would like to ask Mary Lou Danley?
Yeah,
if you had a chance.
We're getting a lot of information from her, but I would like to talk to her about the financial benefits that she was receiving and really see if she can put forward any of her digital footprint in terms of their relationship going back so many years, and particularly around the 3 months prior to this date.
All right. Kimberly Guilfoyle. I could talk to you all day, but we're going to move on, and then I'll see you on
and
the
then
5.
I'll talk to you later.
That's right. All right, major headlines coming from the White House as we await today's news briefing later this hour. The president raising eyebrows last night at a military dinner. Kristen Fisher is live on the North Lawn. Any clarification from the White House about what storm he was referring to?
Not yet, Dana, but it could be cleared up in the briefing, though I doubt it. President Trump has repeatedly said that he doesn't like to telegraph what kinds of military moves he might be mulling over, even if he likes to advertise that he's at least thinking about them, as he did last night. One of the leading theories about what he was referring to is Iran. President Trump has 9 days to decide if he will decertify the Iran nuclear deal. Several of his top military advisors have advised him against it, but President Trump has repeatedly said that he believes the deal is not in the nation's best interest. Listen to what he said last night.
In addition, we must not allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. The Iranian regime supports terrorism and exports violence, bloodshed, and chaos across the Middle East. That is why we must put an end to Iran's continued aggression and nuclear ambitions. They have not lived up to the spirit of their agreement, and we will be discussing that tonight.
But, President Trump could also have been referring to North Korea or maybe even ISIS fighters in Niger, where 3 U.S. Green Berets were killed just this week, Dana.
And it could have been something on a different topic. It could have been even a domestic issue, and not necessarily this one, but wanted to get your take because something that's going to come up at the briefing that we're waiting for Sarah Sanders to start any minute now. We're going to bring it to you live. But this announcement about rolling back the Obamacare contraception mandate, what do you think of that?
So here's the deal. Before these exemptions were limited to religious beliefs. But now, under this new rule that was just announced today, these exemptions have expanded to sincerely held moral objections as well. The sincerely held part is the exact wording as released by the Department of Health and Human Services just this morning. Its spokeswoman put out a statement that reads, quote, "No American should be forced to violate his or her own conscience in order to abide by the laws and regulations governing our healthcare system." So how many women could this possibly impact? Well, the Department of Health and Human Services says that this will not affect about 99.9% of women. They put the number at about 120,000. But Planned Parenthood, they put the number much higher. They say, quote, "The Trump administration just took direct aim at birth control coverage for 62 million women. This is an unacceptable attack on basic health care that the vast majority of women rely on." So this is going to be a very big topic at the briefing. Something else, and this is a story that really just popped up that's gaining a lot of traction online, Dana. It's something that President Trump said during an event for Hispanic Heritage Month inside the White House just about an hour ago. He was talking about the hurricane relief effort that's ongoing in Puerto Rico, but it's his pronunciation that's raising some eyebrows. Listen to this.
We are also praying for the people of Puerto Rico. We love Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. And we also love Puerto Rico.
I'm sure that's something the press secretary will be asked about when this briefing gets underway.
I thought that was super
about 20
cute.
minutes. You like that?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was very much like how any of us might have handled it. So thank you so much, Kristen.
He's going for it.
Yeah, I loved it. Sometimes you just got to let loose. All right, thanks very much.
See ya.
So it's been a really great week here on the Daily Briefing, our first week, and we have more terrific guests lined up next week. Among them, former First Lady Laura Bush. I will sit down with Mrs. Bush at the George W. Bush Presidential Library in Dallas to discuss her foundation's pledge to support education in the aftermath of the recent hurricanes. That's next Tuesday, October 10th, right here on the Daily Briefing. Some cryptic remarks from the president as Washington deals with several foreign policy challenges. Ambassador John Bolton joins us to talk about the Iran nuclear agreement and what he thinks the president meant by the calm before the storm. Plus, why a top Democrat says it's time for new leadership in the House. President Trump meeting with top Pentagon brass at the White House last night, telling reporters that the gathering could be seen as, quote, calm before the storm. Those cryptic comments come as we face several foreign policy challenges. Let's bring in Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Fox News contributor, and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Sir, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be with you.
What do you think the president might have been referring to? Was it Iran, North Korea, or something we don't know?
Well, you know, it's obviously hard to say, but I think before the dinner with spouses, he met with these commanders. And I think if they simply went around the world with their different areas of responsibility, it would bring home to anybody the nature of the very serious threats the United States and its friends face around the world. So I think for the commander-in-chief, that could have been a very sobering conversation, and perhaps that's what his remark reflected.
Let's go to Iran. You have not been shy for years about saying what a terrible deal you think that the Obama administration made with Iran. Now President Trump, he has a chance to certify or recertify Iran and this deal next week, and all indications are that he plans to decertify. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think he's on the verge of making a mistake. I think his advisors are pushing him in the wrong direction. You know, honestly, the certification question is utterly irrelevant to the real question, which is this a good deal for the United States or not? If it's not a good deal, we should get out of it. And that's what he said during the campaign. That's what he should do. You know, I'm not aware of any major agreement the United States has internationally, not treaties, not executive agreements, not anything that has a legislative companion comparable to the Corker-Cardin bill that requires this certification process. And I have to say, the Corker-Cardin bill was a mistake from the get-go, and this whole debate over certification is one more pernicious effect of it. I just repeal the whole thing. I don't care really whether he certifies or not. It's better to decertify, but it's not enough if you don't get out of the deal. And you ask yourself, how logically can the president say this deal is not in America's national interest, but by gosh, I'm going to stay in it?
Well, if you'll stay with me, we're going to have tape in just a moment. We're getting it fed to us, and President Trump did address what he meant last night, so we'll find out that. And I'll hopefully keep you around, sir, so you can answer that. I imagine that the advisors are telling him that Iran is technically in compliance with the deal.
But
they're not. So
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to ask you. Why would you say they're not?
Look, they have exceeded a number of limits already. I think it's indicative that they're testing the envelope of what they can do. And let's be clear, when people say the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has certified Iran as compliance, the only thing they can say is what they know to observe. Do you think that Iran would actually violate this deal at a previously known nuclear site that the IAEA is inspecting? Of course not. They're cooperating with North Korea on ballistic missiles, almost certainly on the nuclear side as well. And the fact is, this deal does include the ballistic missile side. It's part of Resolution 2231 that the Security Council adopted. It's an annex to that. I think they're not in compliance. I don't think they ever intended to be in compliance. But even if they were technically in compliance, the Iranians have never given up their desire to have nuclear weapons. And this deal simply gives them cover. It does not help the U.S. achieve its objective of preventing them from getting nuclear weapons.
Okay, so we have President Trump. He was signing the National Manufacturing Day proclamation, and he spoke just a moment ago. Let's listen.
Manufacturing. My administration strongly supports that goal, and we've been supporting it for a long time. And it's really now starting to pay off, as everybody behind me knows. And that's why I've asked members of my cabinet to travel across the country, share our message, and meet with the workers. And they are hard workers. We've also already created tens of thousands of new manufacturing jobs. Plants and companies are coming back into our country. You see it with announcements now from automobile companies to every kind of company. They're coming back in, and perhaps even more importantly, they don't want to leave anymore because they know they're leaving a very good thing. So we're creating thousands more jobs. And if Congress acts on our historic tax cut, the largest in the history of our country, and also tax reform, and that framework that we've put forward, it will be even more so. Under the current law, products made in America are taxed at a marginal rate of 35%, and really sometimes much higher than that, putting our manufacturers at a tremendous disadvantage to the manufacturers in other countries. We want to dramatically reduce the tax on American manufacturers so that we can compete and win on the world stage. And I will tell you, the receptivity to what we're proposing is fantastic. We're keeping our companies, and the companies are coming back in. And perhaps most importantly, we're making our workers happy, and they love to work. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And maybe a couple of folks behind me would want to say a few words. Would you like to say something?
Sure. I'd like to thank you, Mr. President, and your administration for taking on the 300,000 regulations. It's going to make it easier for us to do our jobs, make us more competitive, and just be more effective.
That's really great. You bring up a very good point. We've cut regulations more than any administration there is. We have nobody's even close, and we're talking about in 10 months, we've cut more regulations than any president, any administration, and we have a long way to go. We're cutting down so that highways don't take 20 years to build, and other things don't take decades and decades, and then find out in many cases after going through the process that they can't build it anyway. So we've cut regulations more than has ever been cut before, and we are continuing. At the same time, I like regulation. It's fine. We want clean air. We want crystal clear water. What we want also is we want safety. But there's a point at which we have to take care of our country, and we have to take care of our workers and our companies. So we're very honored, and that's a great point that you bring up with regulations. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Anybody? Yes.
Thank you so much, Juan, for having us here, and thank you for all the support that you've been giving to manufacturing. According to a recent survey with NAM, 2/3 of manufacturing feel that this tax reform is going to help us hire more people. It's going to help us get more machinery, get more equipment in our factories. And on behalf of my company, and I know all the manufacturing, just thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very nice. That's really nice. Anybody else want to say anything? Anybody? You become very famous if you do. Well, I want to thank you all very much.
Mr. President,
Yes, Jay.
Jay
Timmons.
We just released our quarterly survey that we conduct with all 14,000 of our members across the country. This is the third quarter where we've seen record optimism by manufacturers. So the three-quarter average is the highest of 90% in the entire 20-year history of our survey. And Mr. President, that is because manufacturers are saying that they believe that tax reform, regulatory relief, infrastructure investment are the keys to making sure that the manufacturing sector is growing and strong and ensuring our exceptional America. So thank you on behalf of all manufacturers for doing exactly that.
I knew about the survey. I didn't want to bring it up because they would say I'm braggadocious if I did.
I'll say it again, 90%.
Thank you, Jay. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay. So this is our proclamation, and this is in honor of our great National Manufacturing Day.
Yes, sir.
And the tremendous success we've been having, especially over the last 9 months. It's been a big difference.
We have 3,000 events across the country. You mentioned your cabinet secretaries are out.
That's right.
Celebrating manufacturing with manufacturers in some of these facilities as well. About 600,000 students and teachers and community leaders will be participating so they can learn all the great things there are to learn about modern manufacturing, and we're hopeful that many of them will join these fine people in the manufacturing.
And they will be. It's happening. Thank you very much, Jay. Appreciate it. So the big question is, who gets the pen? What do you think? Who gets? Should we do it, Jay? Maybe Jay Timmons?
You saw a hand outstretched, right?
Oh, good. Come on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Mr. President, what did you mean by calm before the storm yesterday? What did you mean by that?
Thank you very much. You'll find out.
We'll find out.
We'll see.
Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, is back with us. Sir, we're just listening to the president. He's talking about Manufacturing Day proclamation, and certainly there is a lot of good news on the economy. And at the end there's still this curiosity from the press. What did you mean by calm before the storm? And he's still going to tease us. We don't really know, and there might not be anything. Next week, you expect the president to make this announcement on Iran. We were talking about that just before the president spoke. And I want to ask you one last question. For those of the president's advisors that might be telling him that the European allies will be very unhappy with the president if he decides to decertify or, as you were suggesting, leave the deal altogether, what would you say the counter-argument is to that?
Well, part of the problem with the deal is the bribery, basically, of trying to get European and American corporations deals in Iran that they don't want to back away from. So there is an issue here, and I've proposed already that you do need a very effective diplomatic campaign to explain to the Europeans and to others why we think this deal is so dangerous and why we need to get out of it. I think I value the allies' opinion, but let's be clear. The president protects American interest, and no president, especially this one, should bend his knee to any foreign power on this score. Of course, we're going to deal with the Europeans and try and explain our rationale, but they don't control us. They're not targets of the Iranians. We are.
All right, John Bolton, a former ambassador to the UN. We appreciate your expertise. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, and congratulations on your show, Dana.
Thank you. So division in the Democratic Party could lead to leadership changes in the House. One California congresswoman is calling on Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and James Clyburn to step down from their posts.
I think that it's time to pass the torch to a new generation. They are all of the same generation. And again, their contributions to the Congress and to the caucus are substantial. But I think there comes a time when you need to pass that torch, and I think it's time.
Congressman Steve Stivers joins me now. He's the chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, and I appreciate you being here, sir. I know that in a lot of races, like in the special that was held in Georgia last year, Nancy Pelosi was actually one of the biggest draws for Republicans to come out and vote for the Republican and against the Democrat. Do you think Nancy Pelosi is going anywhere?
I don't think Nancy Pelosi is going anywhere, but it's no surprise that her own colleagues have caught on to what voters have known for years, and that's that Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party are out of touch. They'd love to whitewash this and put a new face on it, but the Democratic Party of 2017 is uber liberal and not competitive in most of America, Dana.
Are you finding that? So you're the chairman of the NRCC, so that means that you're looking across, and your responsibility is for the 2018 midterms. That's no small task.
That's right.
And so as you look across, do you think that the Republicans have the advantage still? I saw Larry Sabato of the University of Virginia. Things the Republicans do, both in the House and the Senate. What is your take?
Well, it's going to be a competitive election. We need to be ready. But just today, Dana, another member of the Democratic House decided not to run for re-election in a district that Donald Trump carried, and that's Carol Shea Porter. So far, we have Carol Shea Porter, Tim Walz, Kyrsten Sinema, as well as Jackie Rosen. 4 of their incumbents in competitive districts have decided not to run for re-election. And we're going to be on offense to go after those seats. And we're still going to have some defense to do, but we're going to be on offense. And today's announcement by Carol Shea Porter also shows that there's probably no Democratic wave, because if it was coming, why would somebody who just got reelected to Congress and has only been there a year and a half be announcing that she's not going to run for Congress again?
Well, one of the things you have to do is protect your incumbents as well. And yesterday,
Yes.
congressional candidate Steve Krieg said about Elise Stefanik, who's a congresswoman, a friend of mine, he said she thinks like a child. She has people set things up for her. She has people put their words in her mouth, and she happily repeats them. I think, recognizing her, I would go after her in that way. I apologize if that's mean, but that's how I do it. Now, let's be clear. So Elise Stefanik was the youngest congresswoman to be elected at 30 years old in 2014. She's serving her second term, so she got reelected. She's chair of the subcommittee on emerging threats. She's appointed to the Intelligence Committee, and she's the first ever female recruitment chair for the NRCC. So I imagine that you work closely with her. Your reaction to his comments and how you are trying to see if you can find some diverse candidates to run, because you mentioned a couple of them.
Yep. And Elise has done a great job, but let me be clear. Elise Stefanik has a distinguished record on the Armed Services Committee, on the Intelligence Committee, of keeping America safe. His comments are not just sexist, they're disgusting. They're not mean, they're sexist. He needs to apologize, and I think the Democratic leadership should disavow his comments. It's really offensive that he would go after.
It's an interesting thing. So I read today that some of the Democrats are trying to basically take the most inflammatory thing any Republican has said and attach it to all Republicans. So you're having to prepare for that. Why do you think it doesn't work the other way, that somebody like this guy who wants to run against Elise Stefanik says that, and the Democrats seem to just basically lose their voice?
Well, they're into identity politics. That's all they do. And that's all they have. But to insult a whole class of people, including women, the way this candidate did is disgusting. Elise Stefanik has an incredible record. She's done more in her young age than this loser ever will do. So, it is what it is. I think she'll be fine.
Coming up on a hard break, Congressman Steve Cypress, thank you. We'll bring you the daily briefing next. We're expecting the White House news briefing to begin any minute, and reporters are likely to ask about the decision that sharply limits the Obamacare contraception coverage mandate, which could mean some women would no longer have access to free birth control. Jessica Tarlov is Senior Director of Research for Bustle.com. Mark Thiessen is a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a Washington Post columnist and former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Both are Fox News contributors, and I'm glad to have you here for your first time on the Daily Briefing, but you'll be back a lot.
Your first week.
But we are awaiting Sarah Sanders' briefing, and I got to say, as a former White House press secretary, I know she's got a lot of topics to cover today, that they're going to be ready and asking her everything, so she's getting ready for that. We will bring it to you live, but in the meantime, Jessica, what is your initial reaction to that decision today by the White House on Obamacare's contraception mandate?
Well, it's not surprising that it happened. The timing is surprising. My reaction is fiercely negative, as I imagine it will be for millions of Americans, including the 62 million women who receive their contraception through Obamacare at this moment. The ACLU is going to be filing lawsuits against the Trump administration. Many will follow suit here. They are going against the Constitution. We have a separation of church and state here. We've seen many quotes about what the Trump administration thinks this will accomplish, including discouraging risky sexual behavior. But people are not going to stop having sex, and everybody knows that. We need to be responsible, make sure that women have reproductive choices that make sense for them, and I think it's a massive mistake, and the timing looks terrible. Why do this today?
Well, I would guess, Mark, why not do it today? I would say probably if you were a Trump supporter, you'd think, why didn't you do this sooner?
Yeah, headline, Donald Trump wants people to stop having sex. That's exactly what happened.
Well, highly
there, right?
unlikely, yeah.
I mean, look, this is, Donald Trump has declared a ceasefire in the federal government's war on the Little Sisters of the Poor. Right. We do have a separation of church and state, and the Obama administration tried to force Catholic nuns to offer contraceptives against their religious beliefs. That is outrageous. That shows the authoritarian impulse of the left. Donald Trump has said the war on people with religious conscience is over, and he's 100% right for doing it, and it couldn't come soon enough.
Jessica, I want to also get your take on the bump stock issue.
Right.
I know you feel strongly about it. Let's listen to Congressman Carlos Curbelo on that and then get your reaction.
This is a blatant circumvention of existing law, so closing that loophole would in no way curtail, diminish, inhibit Americans' Second Amendment rights. It would just reemphasize or reiterate something that's already in existing law, that automatic weapons cannot be used.
So do you think that Democrats could find agreement with Republicans to ban bump stocks, and would you support that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad to see that we have bipartisan agreement here on something related to gun control and common sense gun reform more generally. But what the NRA is doing here is just distracting us from the real issue at hand. Bump stocks, that's an easy one. But what they're trying to get through as well is national right to carry reciprocity, which means that if you have a right to carry a concealed weapon in your state, you should then be authorized to do it in another state, even if that state doesn't allow concealed carry permits. And that's what the NRA is after. This is an easy one. 6 GOP senators jumping at the chance to say, hey, I'm for gun control in this tiny little way, but we're not going to get universal background checks. We're going to let people take their guns across state lines, even if it's not allowed. So it's just a big distraction. And to Mark's point about the birth control, the reason not today is there are a lot of things going on right now. Maybe we could get Puerto Rico some lights before we start going after these now constitutionally protected rights.
Well, you know that they're working on all of that. It's like disaster recovery and policies very different.
Or the calm before the storm. Or Vegas.
You can do two things at once, Jessica. Come on.
Right. And Mark, you know that when announcements are ready to be made, they are
made.
made. Mark, let me ask you, because you wrote about this bump stock issue today, and you said Republicans should just go ahead and actually get this done.
Absolutely. Look, Dianne Feinstein and 33 Democrats have introduced legislation that was very narrowly crafted to get rid of bump stocks and other devices that turn automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons, into automatic weapons. Republicans and the NRA are already in record supporting the automatic weapons ban. It was passed, signed into law by Ronald Reagan 30 years ago. This is a loophole. We should close it. But they shouldn't do it. What the NRA is doing, which is a mistake, is trying to say, well, we should just do this not through legislation, but let the ATF ban them. We don't want to have unconstitutional executive actions that haven't been authorized by Congress by the ATF.
Yeah,
I think a lot of Republicans don't want to vote for gun control legislation, so they should vote for it and have it done.
Mark Thiessen, Jessica Tarloff, thank you so much.
I agreed with this last bit. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dana.
New reports that Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is expected to plead guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy charges. Bergdahl disappeared from his post in Afghanistan in 2009 and was held captive for years by the Taliban. Doug McKelway is live at the Pentagon with more. We've been waiting for this, Doug.
That's right, Dana. You know, and, since his release by the Taliban and the announcement of court-martial charges against him, a lot of people do not realize that Bo Bergdahl is still in the Army. He has been serving as a low-level clerk at Fort Sam Houston in Texas, where he is under the watchful eye of a security detail to protect him from fellow soldiers. It's been more than 8 years now since Bergdahl walked away from his post in Afghanistan and only 16 days from his scheduled court-martial. But today the Associated Press is reporting that he is expected to plead guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. The Army would not officially confirm that report, telling Fox News, quote, "We continue to maintain careful respect for the military judicial process, the rights of the accused, and ensuring the case's fairness and impartiality during the ongoing legal case." Also asked to confirm the AP story, Bergdahl's attorney, Eugene Fidel, who is at Yale Law School, abruptly ended a phone call with Fox News' Brooks Singman, saying with a terse no comment, he hung up the phone. Bergdahl's alleged assertion has been the subject of just intense debate and polarization here in the United States. One side of that debate reflected by the comments from then candidate Donald Trump in 2015. Here he is.
We're tired of Sergeant Bergdahl, who's a traitor. He's a traitor, a no-good traitor, who should have been executed.
And another view expressed by then-President Barack Obama, who in a Rose Garden ceremony flanked by Bergdahl's parents equated the circumstance of Bo Bergdahl to that of a wounded soldier left on the battlefield.
And he wasn't forgotten by his country, because the United States of America does not ever leave our men and women in uniform behind.
It is estimated that as many as 6 U.S. soldiers died searching for Bo Bergdahl while he was in Taliban captivity. Yep. And he, by the way, shipped, as you recall, most of his belongings home before he walked away from his post.
All right, Doug McKelway, thank you so much. We are awaiting the White House briefing, and we'll take you there as soon as it starts.